Chef, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
So good.
There are two things we want to talk to you about: your love of
Okay.
CrossFit and your love of cooking. And I wanted to start in the cooking world because I think that's where most people are most familiar with you. But when did you
I would
discover
hope so.
that you loved cooking?
It's such a long story, but the short version of it is, I grew up in a household where, my parents are Italian and Jewish. And if the cable man came over, they were like, "Did you make him a sandwich?" I grew up in Long Island, New York. And so feeding people was, it was just sort of it was hospitality even in my home. And I always worked in restaurants. My parents owned a small deli in Los Angeles when we moved here. And so I was always in the hospitality world. If anyone's from LA or knows Los Angeles, I worked at Hot Dog on a Stick, in the Sherman Oaks Galleria, very sort of Valley girl, 1990. And I was just always in that world, of hospitality. And I didn't really realize that I wanted to cook until I was in New York. I was working in front of the house. I was a manager. I was a server. And I worked for my first female chef, and I was watching her run this kitchen, and the way she was sort of like hyping up all of her line cooks, and there was this like camaraderie, and there was this brigade, and I just fell in love with it. And I didn't do it with the idea that I was going to be on television, because at the time there were very, very few people on television. It was like Wolfgang Puck, Bobby Flay, Mario Batali, and that was it, Martha Stewart. And then, I came back to Los Angeles because I graduated culinary school right after 9/11, and there was really no work in New York City. And I started working for Wolfgang Puck. Never thought that in a million years that I would get hired by him. And I worked garde manger 3, which is basically I was allowed to heat up soup and like just stand there. And didn't even know I was going to be very good at it. It's very different. Like my love of cooking and my desire to do it then sort of compounded with, can I actually do the thing? Because you have to learn how to, all these movements and timing. And so it took many, many years. But I definitely like my family background of this love of food, and now that I'm in this world, people say to me all the time, of course, when we were in high school, you would roast us chickens. My girlfriends would invite guys over for a barbecue, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm going to make a hot dog bar." And she was like, "It's kind of not the point of like us inviting the guys over." And I was just like, "Well, I'm going to make this great hot dog bar." And so they all have these memories of me doing it. So it makes so much sense to them. And I kind of pieced it together, but there's no other industry that I could possibly be in.
Mm-hmm. And what did that process look like? So making the decision that you wanted to pursue cooking and then kind of working your way in, because I do feel like there's more opportunity now to not necessarily be classically trained or still.
Oh yeah, you don't need to be. Yeah. I say this out loud with the utmost respect for schools and the school that I went to. I was at the French Culinary Institute in Manhattan, which is now the International Culinary School. And there were great teachers there. Jacques Pepin was there, Daniel Boulud. And so it's an incredible school, but everything that I learned in the field, to be honest. And so it's a trade, in the same way that a plumber is a plumber, or, and yes, you need to have a license and all of those things and go through some type of schooling or, obviously benchmarks of understanding the process. But it's not necessarily something that you need to go to school with. A lot of the chefs that I know that work for some of the biggest chefs in the world never went to culinary school. They went in there and they said, I'll work for minimum wage. I'll be a dishwasher. Just teach me. I'll be your apprentice. It's a little bit harder these days because of workers' compensation and liability laws and things like that. So, this whole like I'll work for free thing doesn't really work. But the process really is deciding that you want to do it, and then every movement from there actually representing what your end goal is, the everyday. And the work that goes in between, you're talking about 10 or 12 years. So, it's hard when I see young kids coming out of culinary school or being like, "Oh, I took this class and now I'm a chef." And I'm like, it doesn't really work that way. You're skipping the middle, and the middle is the best part. The middle is where you get your bumps and bruises and your burns and your scrapes, and you learn to fall on your face and get back up again. And, you don't want to just jump into the, look at me, I'm this like incredible chef. It took me years to even be okay with people calling me chef. It felt strange. It was this title that you earned because of the amount of work that, layered and bricked itself on top of one another. And so it started in culinary school. And then started working for Wolfgang Puck, and I worked for him for about 10 years, and it was working every single station. Like I said, I started in Garde 3, which is obviously like a strange word. It's basically it's a salad station. It's like the lowest of the low station. And I was literally allowed to heat up soup, and then I passed to someone else and they plated it. And then I was allowed to finally make salads, and that was a big deal. But the positions in that kitchen were so coveted that you really didn't actually get to move on unless someone like hurt themselves or got sick or God forbid went on vacation. I remember this is an awful story, but Garde 1, she was allowed to like cook foie gras and sear salmon and actually like heat things from a raw state to a cooked state. And she had to go in for a like fibroid removal. And I was like, yes. I was like,
take
sounds
all
awful.
you need.
But I was like, this is my shot. This is my shot to actually cook something. And then the same thing with the pasta station guy. He was like, I haven't been on vacation in 15 years. He had this like mental breakdown. And I was like, yes, I will learn how to make pasta now, because, it was just people who were willing to do this like insane, it's an insane world. It's an insane world.
Yeah, that kind of competitive atmosphere, I think, would be pretty intimidating to people, especially early on. How did you deal with that when you were first starting out?
It is intimidating. And it has to be. I mean, it's a very intense situation to work in, and so, when people, are asked, I wouldn't sort of give up that sort of aggressive, competitive atmosphere, because if you're in that position and you're doing 400 covers a night and you're doing these precise, techniques, it requires you really can't be sort of like faint of heart and faint of mind. You have to be mentally strong. You have to be mentally tough in order to really work in that kind of atmosphere. And so, how did I deal with it? I grew up with a Sicilian father. And so, I was like changing tires at 7 years old. He was always like, a lady should always have her tire changed, but you should know how to do it. And so it was like this very strange balance of like knowing how to do everything, but then like being like, but you're still a lady. And so it was, I definitely attribute sort of that thick skin and that, work ethic to my father. He was in construction his entire life, built homes from the ground up. And so it was ingrained in me in a very young age.
You've talked a little bit about these different stages within the kitchen. It kind of made me realize how little we know about that scenario. Can you kind of like shed a little bit more light on what those kind of rungs of the ladder look like?
So when you start out, I was hired as a line cook in the restaurant, which is, the sort of lowest tier of line cooks. But then if you really look at the entire structure of a kitchen, right? So you'll start with an executive chef, or you'll start with a chef de cuisine. An executive chef and a chef de cuisine are basically, the executive chef would be running the day-to-day. A chef de cuisine, if there is one, it always usually depends on sort of how big the restaurant is. So I'll use an example like mine for now. I've got 3 restaurants. I have a chef de cuisine, a CDC, who is in charge of overseeing all of the executive sous chefs and the sous chefs and the junior sous chefs of all the restaurants. So I have a chef. I'm considered the executive chef. I am sort of the everything. My chef de cuisine runs the day to day, and then some of them are executive sous chefs, some of them are just sous chefs, and some of them are junior sous chefs. And so that's sort of your tier of leadership. And then it goes into, you have a porter who is responsible for just collecting, everything that's delivered for the day, maybe doing some deeper cleaning. You've got dishwashers, you've got prep cooks. Sometimes you have lead prep cooks, people you're giving very specific, different foods of, like my pasta guy is a lead prep cook. He's making specific pastas every single day. He's making sauces and things like that. So he's a little bit higher than just a prep cook that maybe is just slicing and dicing. And then you have line cooks and then lead line cooks. So again, for example, I have a pasta station that is sometimes 2 to 3 people work just that one station. You'll have a lead who runs the whole station and 2 that sort of assist. And then that's pretty much the brigade inside of the restaurant.
Oh, wow.
When was your first sort of what you would consider a big break?
It's for me, it was more my personal declaration of wanting to move on and be in the restaurant industry alone without the people that had sort of raised me. So when you work for a mega corporation like Wolfgang Puck, who has had this name, who has built a restaurant empire from being an immigrant coming here from Austria, opening a restaurant and now owning an empire in the United States, and what you learn from that, and the volume cooking that he does, meaning like we do 500, 600 covers in a very fine dining restaurant that gets Michelin stars. Usually you don't see both. Like usually when you have Michelin star, high Michelin stars, 2 or 3 stars, it's fine dining, white tablecloth. That service doesn't really yield to volume cooking of 500, 600 covers, but he does. When you leave that nest, it's very scary because people are like, why would you leave? This is your entire identity. This could be your entire identity. Working for someone like this for the rest of your life, there's always an opportunity to make money and be in this corporation in a big way. And I left after about 10 years to open my own thing and to find out really what I wanted to say in cooking, what food really meant a lot, like what style of food meant something to me, what my expression of it is. And so that was, I think, sort of my coming out personally, where I was like, I no longer want to do this fine dining food that has taught me so much. I really want to see what I can do. And so I worked for a company in LA called FBE, and they gave me an opportunity to open my own restaurant, which, for the record, totally not ready to do it. Shouldn't have even been like, I was like way in over my head. And unfortunately didn't do well. The restaurant ended up failing and closing, and I thought I would never cook again. And I was heartbroken, and the media got a hold of it because I had done Top Chef, and it was just this like ravaging of the dead body. And people love to see people fail, especially when they've had all this sort of like hype around them. And so it was really heartbreaking. And so I didn't cook for a while, and then I got back into cooking, basically doing private chef work for Eddie Murphy. And I cooked for him a while, and I sort of like Stella got her groove back that way. And then from there, I opened 3 very successful restaurants with business partners now who, it just wasn't as traumatic. It wasn't as like, let's notify the entire world. And, I really figured out who I was and what I wanted to be and what my voice was, what my style of cooking was. And, I didn't want to regurgitate what I had just learned. I wanted to actually have a style. So it was sort of those sequence of events that got me to like this moment.
And you mentioned like the moment of like doing private chef work and working for Eddie Murphy. And that was kind of like great movie reference.
Yeah.
What was it about that scenario that allowed you to kind of rediscover yourself and find that groove?
There was no pressure to perform for anyone except for this incredible family that just wanted good food. So it was almost just going back to my roots as to why I wanted to cook again, or why I got into cooking to begin with. So, because there's so many times we're separated by the business aspect and how do you make money, and the pressure of investors saying like, this is what it should look like, and these are the numbers we need to meet, versus the actual just art and the craft of what it is that I do. And so when I started working for this incredible family, they just wanted good food. And so they were like, here's my credit card. And, I would come into the house and I would bake all day and just make like 5 or 6 cakes. And I fell in love with this entire process again, which then gave me sort of the confidence being like, you're not a moron. You know what it is you were doing. That was just a bad situation. Like, stop crying about it. Like, get back on the horse. And so it was that whole sort of rediscovery of like why I got into the business with sort of a boost of confidence, because they thought that I was like the greatest thing since like sliced bread. And, when I left, and actually I still get phone calls like periodically, they're like, are you by chance like looking for work? I'm like, no, I'm not, but I love you guys and I appreciate it. And if there was any family that I would cook for ever again in a million years, it would be yours.
How did you develop your style of cooking?
I developed I think that my style has always been my style. I think that this intuitive, the way I grew up eating Italian food, American Italian food, my love of those kinds of restaurants in Long Island and Staten Island, that quintessential like mishmash of regional Italian cooking that you see like all over Little Italy and all those sort of like boroughs in Long Island, or boroughs and then in Long Island. And then growing up in Los Angeles, I moved here when I was 11, and my love of, Mexican food has been overwhelming. My travels to Spain and to Colombia, and all of those led me to build DAMA. And so it's just been more about paying attention to what my intuition says about what I'm into. And it comes down to technique. So everything that I learned technique wise, how to build a business, how to run a line, how to get people to work for you, work with you, how to properly cook things to the best degree you can, all came from Spago, all came from my training in the restaurant industry with such an incredible restaurant group that taught technique at its finest. Now just sort of implemented in a way that I'm like, I just like fried calamari. I just like, ricotta cheese on bread. And so it's taking those like fine dining mentality and just sort of marrying it with this very comforting, straightforward, intuitive cooking that I just pick up along the way,
Even hearing you say that, it feels like there's so many crossovers in those basic principles between cooking and CrossFit and like the health and the approach that we take. I'm kind of curious. This is from my perspective. I look at some of the cooking that you see on TV and some of like the dishes and things that get presented. And I'm curious, how do you balance that with the principles of CrossFit and training and nutrition, feeding, physically feeding performance and health and things like that? When sometimes the stuff that you're cooking, maybe from a macro standpoint,
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, so the insane thing is, it's like, I come from a group, which I think is very slowly, hopefully changing the narrative of what my group stands for. And when I say my group, my chefs in my world, which is like, we're insane partiers. We drink all the time. We do a ton of blow. Do you know what I mean? Like, seriously, like this is how I grew up. This is the world that I grew up in. We eat randomly all day long. I grew up in kitchens where when we all went out as chefs, we would eat at a table and people would have to get up from the table, sometimes throw up in order to come back and finish what it was eating. It's a very dysfunctional like version of ourselves to a certain degree, right? We love what it is that we're doing, but that thing that we're doing sometimes actually is the worst thing for us physically and mentally. I got to a point where I was just like, I can't work 90 hours a week living any of this kind of lifestyle because it doesn't work. My brain doesn't work. My brain is cloudy. I'm irritated. I'm yelling at people that I shouldn't be yelling at. I'm not sleeping. This is the worst version of myself trying to do the best version of the thing. And so the two worlds don't live together. And so it wasn't until I was like, my health and nutrition mattered to me in order for me to do this thing that I love to the highest capacity. And I have that conversation with all my chefs in general. I was like, absolutely. Do we love to eat? 100%. Do I go out and splurge? Without question. Do I do it every day? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? Do I wake up in the morning and drink a ton of water before I put anything else into my body? When I'm at home and eating at home and just doing my day to day, am I paying attention to like my fat and my protein and my vegetables and staying away from, food that doesn't serve me? Without question. Am I working out 6 days a week, whether it's just like a walk? 100%, because I can't work to the best of my ability. I can't be the leader that I want to be or represent this like excellence if, I'm not behaving in that manner. Mm-hmm. And so it all correlates. It all correlates for me. I have team building exercises with my chefs that range from Korean barbecue to ice bath. Oh. So there's just balance in there.
Hopefully maybe do them together if you can.
We don't do Korean barbecue and then ice bath because that's not, that's not the way. We do ice bath and maybe go to like Bay Cities and eat like Italian subs. Yep. And so, but that for me, that's the balance of that works.
Yeah. How did the opportunity to get on national television first arise for you?
So I do talk a lot about, and it does seem, some people believe it, some people don't, where it's like the words of, just throwing it out there, the words of affirmation, like you say it and it'll happen. I was working for Eddie Murphy, and I was in, that was the second time I did Top Chef. I basically had seen I think it was like Rachel Ray and a Triscuit box. And she was like on a Triscuit box. And I was like, you know what? There's other things out there. Like I can do this thing.
Mhm.
And when you talk about food competition shows back then, it was like, we didn't talk about it. If you were on a food competition show and you work for someone like Wolfgang Puck, you never said that you did this thing, you know, and it's still a little bit like that in the elite cooking world versus like what I do. And I consider myself having done both. And so I had a group of people when we worked at Spago where we would watch Top Chef, and this was Top Chef season 1. I did season 4. I'm like the oldest, like serious, like alum. And we would go into the walk-in and we'd be like, did you see what happened last Wednesday? Like we didn't want anyone to know that we were watching the show. And so when I started working for SBE, they'll do like cold calls to large restaurant groups. And, you know, they're always looking for women because there's so few of us that actually cook at that level. And so they were like, does she want to come in and audition? And I was like, as long as I don't have to wait in line, because I would always see like people waiting in line to do these reality shows. I was like, as long as I don't have to wait in line, I'll go. And at the time I was getting ready to open the first restaurant that didn't do well. And I went and they were like, we love you. We want you to do the show. And you leave in 6 days. And I was like, what? Like, this is insane. And, yeah. And before you knew it, I was on a flight to Chicago and they never asked me to cook once. That was the best thing. I like made a video and I had 2 in-person conversations. And all of a sudden I was on the largest cooking competition show on the planet. And I got there and I saw Stephanie Izard, who had opened up Girl in the Goat and, you know, was nominated for a James Beard Award. I saw Richard Blais, who, you know, had won Iron Chef America and, you know, James Beard Award nomination. And I was just like, what am I doing here? You know? And I did really well. It made it to the finale with all of them. And so turns out I can cook really well for sport. So that was something I didn't know that I could do. You know, that just worked out, I think, because multitude of reasons. Like I usually just don't really care what anyone else is doing. So I wasn't sort of fogged by all of these crazy chefs that had these resumes and backgrounds. I'm like, I'm just going to make you really good pasta. Like, I'm just going to make you a really good salad. And I started getting all this, like these accolades and this confidence building from people being like, you won, you did this. And I was like, okay, great. I guess I'm just going to cook the way I cook because people like it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned cooking for sport. Like what is the primary difference there? Because I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, cameras, you know, lights and, you know, a timer to it. It seems so far departed from what I would normally envision.
But it's literally exact. I mean, it's exactly that. I mean, if you're performing in a sport for television, it's the same exact thing. They have cameras, they have lights, they have all of these other things that are going on while they have to do the thing that they've been trained to do. And so that's why I call it cooking for sport, because it's like I'm a trained like chef athlete in this competition world of cooking. And so like I just did a show called Tournament of Champions where I've been, you know, now it's like I've been cooking for almost 12 competitive cooking for almost 12 years, which is insane. So but there's so much volume of competitive cooking on television. So like I'll have producers or cameramen that are, you know, they're used to watching, you know, people that have never done any kind of competitive cooking before. And they're like, oh my God, the food is so different. I'm like, yeah, because we've been trained in this sport, if you will. I always say that my Top Chef days doing 2 seasons of that is like, you know, the Olympics of competitive cooking, of really like learning how to play this game to a way, because there's certain things that just work well in competition. There's certain avenues that you can take in those kind of cooking competition. There's, you know, when you can take a risk and when you need to like pull it back in order to really be successful and do well in the competition. So it's more of a mind game. Like it's not just about the cooking, it's about how you process what a challenge is in a very short period of time and then produce this dish. Like every once in a while something comes out and I'm like, that's insane, you know, especially Tournament of Champions. There's this insane wheel that spits out 5 words. And in those 5 words, we somehow make a dish sometimes in the smallest amount of time, which is like 30 minutes. And it's like, who does that?
Yeah, it's a great show. Have you watched it? It's
I've only seen
awesome.
one episode of it, but there's so many parallels between like what you're explaining and like competing at the CrossFit Games at the highest level. Yeah. And I'm curious because one of the common comparisons that we make is, you know, athletes that are in the gym CrossFitters. They're good when they're in their own environment and they're sitting. Yep. And there's the performers, the athletes that can both do amazing things in the gym, but really shine when they have to step onto that arena. And I'm curious, are you more of an in the gym, or are you more of a performer relative to both of your skill sets? Which one do you identify as more?
I do both really well. No. I actually have to do both really well. Otherwise, like, I wouldn't have restaurants.
Yeah.
I think in my world, you know, in order to have the restaurants that I had to be a great line cook before I could do anything else. I had to be great in my day to day. Otherwise, it wouldn't translate actually to the competition floor, if you will. Yeah. Because, you know, if I'm not great at searing, great at braising, you know, in this very sort of quick time frame, and really the restaurant prepares you for that intense, this has to be up in 7 minutes. The difference is really just this idea that you are now competing, this idea that you are no longer in your safe haven of your restaurant where there is no real clock. You can come in 2 hours early if you need to. There isn't a cameraman and a sound guy and a producer staring at you. There isn't a live studio audience that's like screaming your name. There isn't all of those like outside factors for you to be able to now like come up with a dish, you know, and then, you know, actually execute the dish. So I think you have to be both. But a lot of times people ask me that all the time. They're like, but this guy's restaurant's so good. Why didn't he do well here? And I'm like, it's a skill that you have to develop over time. This ability to compete in cooking. It doesn't just happen. There's so many things that you break down. And the other part to it too is when you're cooking in your restaurant, it's not like you have some host that shows up randomly with a whole pig and is like, now you have to cook this. It's like, you know what you're doing. So it takes away the sting of not knowing. Competitive cooking, we normally have no idea what we're going to cook until the second that they tell us that we're going to cook something. And then we have to build these bridges and then do it in a very small period of time. Sometimes we have to shop for it too. You know, sometimes the ingredients aren't even there. And then we have to present. And so there's so many levels to that. That is just, I sometimes don't even think about it until I'm like having these conversations with people. I'm like, God, that's insane.
Mm-hmm. How did you find CrossFit?
I found CrossFit because I moved to Venice, California, like 10 years ago, and a gym opened on my corner called Deuce. And I was like, my very first experience of CrossFit was with a really bad gym that will remain nameless in Hollywood, that I was like, they were so mean. They were so mean. I remember like looking at the rings and they were like, don't touch those. And I was like, okay. And it was just like, just not the welcoming experience that I have had now in every single gym that I've been to in Paris and Spain and Colombia. And like every time I drop in somewhere, you know, and specifically like my gym, where it's like this culture of people who like genuinely care about what it is that you do. And that's more what I fell in love with, was the culture, because it was, oh, I need to exercise. And I remember talking with the owner, Logan, and he was like, what's your goal? And I was like, I just want to look great naked. And he was like, cool, fair, totally fair. Mm-hmm. He's like, but what if you got better at doing all of these things along the way? And I was like, sure, that sounds great. He's like, what if the performance in your life got better? What if your work got better? And I was like, sure. Sounds good. You know what I mean? And so like, I just kind of like shushed him. I was like, I just need to like work out. And all of a sudden I was a part of this like posse that was like skill building, and they were teaching me things, and I was a student, and the way he explained things and his like devotion to holding us like a standard and an excellence to a specific, I was like, oh, I never looked at a squat so deeply. Like I didn't realize there was like a love song for like toes to bar. And it was just like this like love affair of fitness and like taking care of yourself and how it all correlated to your life. And that's how I fell in love with it. Where I started to see, when I paid attention in the gym and I started to be able to do all these things, how it all of a sudden changed everything that I was doing in my life.
And we've teased them a little bit here earlier, but what were the biggest parallels between the cooking community and the pursuit of cooking and your passion, and the pursuit of, I guess, health and fitness through CrossFit that you found?
You know, it's really just been like, I can't work the way I want to work. And now I'm flying. 2019, I flew 200,000 miles to shoot, opened restaurants. You know, I'm getting my sleep on a plane. It's like, if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm 45 this year. I'm like, I can't keep living, I need to really pay attention to my health, wellness, my mindset, all of those things in order to actually do the work that I want to do well. And so, it was like, as I started to do all these things and take care of my nutrition and take care of my, work my body, to pay attention to my sleep, to pay attention to my water, my work started to grow without question. I work a lot with Guy Fieri, and like over the last couple of years, he literally said to me, he goes, there's something about you that's different. And not me. He's like, he's comparing me to, like, he was just like that, your flow, the way that, it all translates to the way that you talk in front of a camera. It translates to the way that you mentor people. It translates to the way that you compete. I know when you're taking care of yourself and I know when you're not. And so one doesn't work without the other, as far as I'm concerned.
You've had plenty of memorable moments inside of the kitchen and on TV. What have been some of your more memorable moments inside of a CrossFit gym?
I remember it was during one of the CrossFit Opens. And that's what I love about it so much. It's like this tangible, it's a way to actually be able to say, I have gotten better without defining it based on like, my ass looks better, my legs are skinnier, whatever someone's goal is, right? I never did a rope climb when I was in high school. I can do rope climbs now. Like, there's an actual process that goes. And I like that tangible, like, it's working. And it was during the CrossFit the CrossFit Open. And this was before they modified anything. And it was like double unders and then toes to bar. And I said to Logan, okay, what if I can't do these? He goes, I guess you're going to spend 20 minutes trying to do double unders. You know what I mean? And I was just like, okay. Like, I love those kinds of answers, And so I sat there frustrated for 20 minutes, the rope just like hitting my legs. I'm getting like rope burns on my my shins, and I'm just so angry, and I'm sweating. I'm like dying of sweat, right? And everyone else is like moving around the gym. And at the end, like the last 3 minutes, I ended up getting like 5 double unders. And it was like, you would have thought I won the lottery. You would have thought that like I made life-changing money. Do you know what I mean? And I know it sounds like so small, when I tell not to you guys, but like when I tell the story sometimes where I was like, I got 5 double unders. It took me 4 hours, and then the same thing happened with toes to bar. There was like another workout where I got to the toes to bar part, and I go, well, what do I do here? He goes, I guess you just try to do toes to bar. And at like 30 seconds on the clock, I got 1.
Nice.
And then the following year, when they were in the workout again, I got 30. And so again, it was this tangible, like last year at this time, I was going to cry because I could barely do 1. Same time, 1 year later, I have 30. And so if that's not progress, I don't know what is.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And so as far as because you've described all the things that you have going on now between TV and restaurants, what are some of the fitness goals that you're maybe focused on now as life starts to shift a little bit and your schedule kind of fills up?
Yeah. So and it happened more last year when everything shut down and we didn't have gyms. They did a program called Delta Bravo. And so it's all dumbbell training that I can literally do anything that I need on the road with a pair of dumbbells, sometimes just one. And what that did over the year, which I thought was like even more insane, which was I actually got stronger somehow using 2 35-pound dumbbells in a range of motion that was like 5 different workouts that consisted of like some of the most basic movements and running. And I got back into the gym a year later and I PR'd my deadlift. I like PR'd my back squat. I PR'd every Olympic, like my favorites, PR'd every single one of them, having not picked up anything heavier than technically 70 pounds in a year. And it was mind blowing. And so I now have this program because it's just like, I can do it on the road. And so there's really no excuse for me not to, anywhere I go, I can find a dumbbell, anywhere I can go, I can even if I just do like 30 minutes of like walking lunges, like there's now something that I can do in every area that I am in the world that just makes me know that I'm like not losing my strength. I'm not falling off the wagon. And the other crazy thing is, even since last year, it's like I've started to now collect equipment where I'm like, did I just build a gym in my house accidentally? You know what I mean? Like that thing has started to happen. And so Logan laughs at me. He's like, it's been like a long time, Antonia, that starts to happen. So, I bought a rower, and now I have a lot of, I have a squat rack coming, and, so there's more stuff in my backyard than I like.
The CrossFit hoarder is what it is.
I'm a CrossFit hoarder. Yeah. I'm getting a sauna. I'm getting a barrel sauna. I'm getting like, I know I've drank the Kool-Aid big time. And the thing to it too, is like, it makes me feel better when I've had like these long days and I come home and everything's just here for me. It just is. It puts Humpty Dumpty back together again, after I've had these, like, after I fall off my wall and I'm like doing like crazy stuff out in the world. And because I still am on television shows where, for sometimes 4 days straight, I'm eating the largest sandwich for 12 hours a day. You know what I mean? And like, there's times in my job where I was like, it's legitimately my job right now to eat these 4 cupcakes, and I'm not going to, a lot of times people use spit buckets because they're like, yes, sugar, whatever, but it's kind of disrespectful to the chef. So I'm like, I'm going to eat your cupcake, bro.
Not sure was going to hear that little spiel about the dumbbell, just a single tier.
Oh my gosh.
So you made him very.
Wait, who is?
Pat Sherwood. He's a big, I don't know if you know who Pat is. We used to work with him. Yeah, he's a big dumbbell fan. So everything you said about dumbbells, he's going to absolutely love.
How about this? The only dumbbell work that I did, I got back into the gym and I can do pull-ups.
Wow.
I can do pull-ups. Yeah. So not only did I PR, like I PR'd all my numbers, but I jumped up onto the bar and somehow did a kipping pull-up. Nice. And I was like, I jumped down and I was like, like I was shocked. And literally Ben, who built the program with Logan, was just like, all that lat training. And I was like,
there you go.
He's like, you're actually using the correct muscles now. And I was like, and literally nothing heavier than a 35-pound dumbbell.
Fitness is a fantastic beast. That is,
yeah,
for sure. I have a couple, I guess, sport adjacent type questions. So for us, in the sport, we always like to compare the greatest of all time. For you in the cooking world, who is like your GOAT?
Oh, I mean, there's a couple. When you look at like what Anthony Bourdain has done for our industry, and not just our industry, but the way the world looks at food and that sort of discovery and that sort of, he took it to like its core of like, this is why we do this thing, and the way that we discover other people's cultures and the way that it brings people together, and that there's this connection in every single part of the world that revolves around food, that you will be able to find common ground with someone that you never thought you would in a million years. That's what food does. And so I think, to me, that sort of larger picture of this world, and I think Jose Andres does it a lot now with World Central Kitchen, and where this idea that like food can save the world, this idea that what he does in feeding people in crisis has been mind-blowing to me, where it's just like there's this healing process that happens, there's this there's this connection that comes from it. It's not just like a sandwich, if that makes, I know it's like a basic level. So to me, like those two men in that world, and the way they've taken what we do on a very basic level and turned it into this global awareness to helping people and to connecting people, to me, just kind of like blows my mind.
I love that you said that. One of my first jobs working for CrossFit was covering regionals as just like a low level PA. But our producer was also a producer on No Reservations, and he made it a point that every stop that we made along the way he found a restaurant that we all would go and commune and eat together as a group and as a unit with the camera guys and everything.
Always
kind of like build that familial aspect. Yeah. And I absolutely love that. So it's cool to hear you say that.
It because it's just so much bigger than what it is that we do, and last year I did a documentary with Food Network and Guy Fieri for everything that happened during the pandemic, and it was like, even watching him last year raise $25 million for restaurant workers, and just not want to sit by. And it's like really all of these incredible chefs using their influence and their power to, like what Jose does, what Anthony did, what Guy did, in a way that changes people's lives, where they, even though it's, the $25 million ended up being $500 checks for people, but it made people feel supported. It made people feel like they weren't alone. It made people feel like, all of these big brands were somehow contributing in the smallest of way, whatever. But it was, it's those kinds of people, I think, that really like have me be like, this is so much bigger than just our restaurants. It's so much bigger than just, this sandwich.
Are there any lessons that you've learned from working out and doing CrossFit that maybe you didn't learn from being a chef? And if so, what are they?
It's interesting you say that. There's a humility and a vulnerability that happens like when you're in a, and I know this sounds like, not sounds crazy to you guys, but when I tell like regular people this, they're always just like, really? You cry when you work out? And I'm like, there's
strap in.
I do all the time.
Exactly. I'm like, there's this vulnerability that comes when you're pushing yourself to these extremes or this thing that you really want to have happen. And there's a lot of humility in it as well. And so I feel like that transfers a lot to my work life where, of looking at to exactly the same, like when I'm feeling so pressed at work and I'm feeling so overwhelmed or like backed into a corner, which all the same things happen when you're working out into a very intense situation, that my response to it is not with aggression, that my response to it isn't with anger. You know what I mean? That my response to it is with humility, and that my response to it is with being vulnerable. For some reason in the gym, it just happens naturally. Like I'm just a broken, sobbing mess. In the restaurant, I kind of like get a little more like, so I've taken that training and been like, I don't need to be aggressive. I don't need to be angry. I can actually just turn this around and have the emotion be something different.
Yeah. You have a daughter, 21 years old, I believe, and you often work out together. What's it like to be able to share those experiences with her?
So my daughter has actually struggled with her weight for the majority of her life. Her father was really overweight. And during COVID and the pandemic, from us doing our dumbbell training, you can tell your friend, she lost 100 pounds.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yes. And so in 1 year, and it was all through us getting up every morning during the pandemic. I still had to go to work, but every morning there was a group of us because I created a gym in my backyard. And I have a huge outdoor space. So there was a group of us that were, somewhat quarantined together and spending time together. And, we would do it with this program in my backyard. And she, through that program, ended up losing 100 pounds. Incredible. And we did Murph that year. And it was the first year that she ever competed it, in its entirety. And she and a friend of her, and her friend too, her friend ended up losing like 70 pounds. And it's still like it was like insane what happened in her group. And she was running back. She was, finishing her last mile, and she's hysterically crying. And I'm like, oh my God, something happened. She, like full mom mode, like she tore a ligament, like, and she's running through it, like just the most dramatic thing. And she stopped and she's just crying. And she's like, I've watched you do this every year. I've watched all these people do this every year. She's like, I've cheated it. I've never wanted to finish it. I've like just half-assed it she goes, and this year I did it. And she was like sobbing. And then my friend Lacey's crying and I'm crying. And I was just like, it's like, and we're having this moment where I was like, when people are like, you're just working out. I'm like, it's not, we're not just working out.
And
it was pretty.
Crying.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, wow. You guys are crying.
Yeah.
But it was really, that's what it's been like to work out with her now. And now it's, do you want to get up and like we do this mile every day, like where we run a mile and then do this like little like thing on the rower before we do our Delta Bravo. And so now she's just. And the best part is too, I never let her win, like no matter what. I'm like, you're gonna earn it. Yeah. You're going to earn it. And so I'm like, I'm 45 this year. Like you got age on me. So as soon as you get to a certain place, like you're going to kill me. So let me have this right now. And so we were doing our sprints one day and she's tall and she just, smoked me. and she looked at me, she goes, you were really trying, right? And I'm like, I'm always really trying. And she had the conversation. She was just like, it means so much more to beat you because you never let me win. You never gave it to me. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, you never just let me have it. She was like, so when I know that I beat her, she's like, it was the greatest feeling of my life.
What are some of the lessons that you're hoping to teach her now as she really enters, the adulthood?
One of the biggest lessons that I just always want her to learn, like everything else aside, is just like never defend bad behavior.
Yeah.
Like, just be a good person, do what you love, and do not defend bad behavior. When you screw something up, you mess something up, you said the wrong thing, you hurt someone's feelings, like, don't defend it, apologize and fix it and move on. You know what I mean? And so, I that's the one thing I just like can't get behind, when someone's like defending like just bad behavior.
Oh man,
that's great advice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. As far as like in the gym, what are maybe some things that, because we talk about like the style of cooking, like your style of cooking, as far as like training and in the gym, what has become your style? What are some things that you've fallen in love with in the gym that have maybe surprised you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because usually like you fall in love with a thing that like is easy for you, you know what I mean? Or that like comes easy. And so originally it was like strongman training. So like any odd object lifting. And because of all the work that I've done in restaurants for so many years, I'm like weirdly strong already without having ever really like trained it. Mm-hmm. And so I walked into the gym all of a sudden very, very like strong because I've always lifted 50-pound bags of flour and carried them upstairs. And so when we had an opportunity to train strongman, I was really good at it. I was like, oh, kegs, this is normal. I do these things all the time. And so like Atlas stones and things like that, like I fell in love with odd object, but for me, like deadlifts are my favorite, like back squats are my favorite things. And then of course, things that question like the irregularity of my training, like you make me do a front squat. I'm like, I get it. I'm working on my abs. Okay. Like, and so like, I'm trying to hold the weight up straight. And so things that obviously expose parts of me that are, not as strong, doing anything single leg, like you had me doing, like anything like single leg, like RDLs or anything like that. Or even just lunging. Lunging was, I would break down into tears. And I remember when I first started this program and we would once a week, 20 minutes of like walking lunges. And I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life. This is going to set me off. And I remember the first time I did it in 20 minutes, I was like, I got 120, and I thought that was like the most amazing thing in the entire world. A year later, I'm up to like 550, you know what I mean? And so it's like, you know what I mean? And so now I'm like, oh, you want to see me do something on one leg? And so now it becomes this thing where I want to train the thing that I'm not good at anymore, instead of just going towards the thing that that I felt successful at, that I was kind of already like good at. So now I'm paying more attention to the things that I'm not. And really, I have to conquer front squats. That one I'm still kind of avoiding. Yeah.
If you could design your own workout, we ask this to a lot of people that we have on. It's like going to be called Antonia or Chef or whatever you want to call it.
There should be a chef one. That would be so awesome.
There should be. Yeah. And we should name it after you. But what would that workout be?
Ooh, I really love the combination of like a Olympic lift, whether it's like or not Olympic lift, but like either a deadlift or so it would be like 3 parts. It would be like either it would be like deadlift, kettlebell swings, and then a short distance run. Like I like those kinds of like lifts really heavy. Like the deadlift has to be really heavy and you're only doing it for 2, you know what I mean? And then it's like maybe some kettlebell swings, and that's technically your rest because you're sprinting on the run. You know what I mean? And so to me, I like those kinds of like, you come in gassed from a run and you have to lift up something heavy. To me, that's like the most, I just love that feeling for whatever it is. It's like you're breathing heavy, you can't breathe. And then you have to walk up to a bar and pick up something really, really heavy.
I like it. I like all that.
I do too. And I know you're a fan of the CrossFit Games.
Yes.
We are super excited about the competition this year, especially on the men's side, because we have no idea who's going to win. Do you have a prediction as far as?
I actually haven't watched anything yet. I haven't watched anything yet. I have it all record. Like, I'm going to go back and I was like, don't tell me anything yet. I've been out of town.
Not saying. I said we won't say anything.
We won't spoil it.
I was interested to see if you had a.
All right, just tell me where Matt Frazier is.
He retired.
He retired.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, that's why he's not in this year. So that's why we don't know who's going to win. Because we know Toomey's going to win for the women. We have no idea who's going to win for the men.
Thing where I was just like, I'm like, how many more can this dude win?
Yeah.
Like, he's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's amazing, absolutely amazing. But I was just like, I mean, just smoked everybody every single year. It's like, you're not even close.
It was,
I don't know. Well, okay, tell me. All right, fine. Tell me who's there.
Well, we got Noah Olson. We have Scott.
Okay.
We have
Justin Medeiros.
We have.
That makes me so happy that Scott Panchik is there. I've wanted him to like. Interesting. I would really, really like to see him. I would really like to see him win. I would really. He's been around for so long. He's like so consistent. You know what I mean? Yep. I think that's real. I would really like to see him win.
Yeah. What do you have coming up in the future here, where people might be able to watch you, or things you have going on in your restaurants?
I mean, if anyone's in LA, I've got 3 restaurants here. I have Scopa, I have Black Market, and DAMA. Those are all open and raring to go, waiting for everyone to come. I mean, everyone has come back. People are eating out 3.5 times a week right now, the national average, which is the highest it's ever been. Wow. And then, you know, all the stuff that I do on Food Network, we have a show coming out called Guy's Chance of a Lifetime, which is going to be great. There's, you know, and just all the other stuff that we've been doing. I've got a couple of projects, but I don't know when this is going to air. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say it yet.
Good stuff.
When are you going to drag Guy and make him do a couple workouts with you?
Oh, so he just did. He just started. He just got with a trainer. Yeah. He always has. So he lives in a lot of mountainous areas. So hiking has always been one of his things. So he's got endurance hiking down. Mm-hmm. So now he's working with a group. It's not net, it's kind of CrossFit-ish. I would like to see him get some barbells in there and really kind of go for it, because I think he's really strong. Mm-hmm. But I've got him on I started doing peptides and just like trying to do all this IVs and like stuff like that. So trying to get everybody working internally really, really well so that they can perform. But he's doing CrossFit-ish. It's more just like HIIT workouts where, a lot of the movements are similar, but it's more just like high intensity. So that he's burning a ton of calories. But I'm like, you need to get strong. I was like, you need to lift.
Yep. I love it.
Well, Chef, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. If we are ever down in Southern California, we'll be sure to patronize one of your finest.
Please.
Best of luck in the gym. I hope you and your daughter continue to crush it, and we will absolutely be looking for you whenever we can on Food Network.
Love it. Thank you guys. I had so much fun with you. And yeah, email me when you're here. So I'll take care of you guys in the restaurant. Come eat.
We will take you up on that 100%.
You're too kind.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Chef.